Good evening. Tonight, there is no need to focus on anything in particular or to follow every word closely. And there is no need to stay awake to understand what is being said, because this is simply a quiet science story told slowly and gently for rest. You can allow your attention to soften and let the sound remain comfortably in the background, knowing that nothing here requires any effort at all. Imagine being near the surface of the ocean, where light is still present and movement is easy to notice, where waves move without urgency and sounds feel distant and muted. As time passes, the surface begins to feel less important. Light grows softer, and details fade naturally without needing to disappear all at once. There is no rushing downward and no sudden change, only a gradual settling as the water becomes darker, quieter, and more still. At greater depths, motion slows, temperature becomes steady, and pressure increases gently, without force or drama, simply as part of the environment. The deep ocean is not a place of activity. It is not loud, and it is not chaotic. It is defined instead by consistency, by calm, and by long stretches of quiet time. Here, there is no day or night, no changing sky, only depth and the slow, continuous movement of water. This story is not about danger, mystery, or discovery, but about how life exists where conditions are steady and extreme in simple ways. About environments that change very little and organisms that have adapted to that stability. And if your thoughts begin to drift, that is completely fine. And if you miss parts of the story, nothing is lost. Because from this point forward, there is no expectation to stay alert. You are welcome to rest, while the science continues quietly in the background. As the surface becomes distant, the ocean begins to change in clear and predictable ways. And these changes are not sudden, but instead follow patterns that have been measured, observed, and described through careful study. The ocean is divided into layers, each defined by depth and light, with the epipelagic zone near the surface where sunlight still reaches and photosynthesis is possible, followed by the mesopelagic zone, often called the twilight zone, where light weakens and gradually fades, and deeper still, the bathypelagic zone, where sunlight no longer arrives at all. These layers are not sharp borders that can be crossed abruptly, but gradual transitions in which light diminishes slowly as depth increases, until it is no longer present. With the loss of light, temperature becomes more stable, and the deep ocean remains cold but not freezing. Unlike surface waters that change with weather and seasons, deep waters maintain nearly the same temperature over long periods of time. Pressure increases with depth as well, in a steady and constant way, not as something that moves or pushes, but simply as the weight of water above, evenly distributed in all directions. In the deep ocean, there are no waves and no tides moving water back and forth against a shoreline. Movement exists, but it is slow and often difficult to notice. Currents flow quietly, shaped by differences in temperature and salinity rather than wind, and these deep currents may take years or even centuries to complete a single path across the ocean. Sound behaves differently here, and without surface disturbance, noise is rare. The environment is defined by long periods of silence, broken only by subtle, distant movement. This is an environment where change happens slowly, where conditions remain consistent, and where stability is the defining feature, rather than activity. As depth increases further, the ocean becomes increasingly uniform, with variations in light, temperature, and movement continuing to diminish until the environment feels almost constant. In these deeper regions, the absence of sunlight is complete, with no gradual brightening or dimming, only darkness that is steady, uninterrupted, and expected. This darkness does not shift with time, weather, or season, and because sunlight does not reach these depths, surface rhythms no longer apply. There is no dawn or dusk, and no visual marker of passing hours. Time is measured instead by slow physical processes, such as the movement of water and the settling of particles. Pressure continues to increase in direct proportion to depth, arriving gradually and without fluctuation. And for organisms that live here, pressure is not a force to resist, but a constant condition present at all times. The seafloor, where it exists, is shaped by geological processes rather than biological ones, as sediment accumulates slowly, often over thousands of years, and volcanic activity and tectonic movement occur far below the surface, largely unnoticed by the water above. Food is limited in the deep ocean, and organic material reaches these depths gradually, often in small amounts, as particles drift downward from the surface and settle slowly through the water column in a process that is continuous but sparse. Because resources arrive at such a slow pace, the deep ocean does not support dense populations, and life is distributed over wide areas where encounters between organisms are infrequent. The environment favors efficiency rather than speed. Energy is conserved, movement is minimal, and growth is slow. In this setting, survival depends on stability rather than competition, as conditions change very little and organisms are adapted to that consistency. This is the physical foundation of the deep ocean, a place defined not by activity, but by balance, not by variation, but by steadiness. From here, life continues in ways shaped entirely by the absence of light. In the deep ocean, life continues without any reliance on sunlight, not as an exception to biological rules, but as a different way those rules are expressed. At the surface, most life depends directly or indirectly on photosynthesis, as plants and algae convert sunlight into energy that then moves through food webs to support other organisms. But in the deep ocean, this pathway does not exist. Sunlight does not reach these depths, and photosynthesis cannot occur. Yet energy is still present, arriving through slower and less visible processes. One of these processes is the gradual descent of organic material from above, as small particles of dead plants, microorganisms, and waste drift downward through the water over time, forming what scientists call marine snow. Marine snow is not snow in the familiar sense, as it does not fall quickly or accumulate all at once, but instead moves slowly, sometimes taking weeks or months to reach the deep ocean. This continuous, gentle supply provides a baseline source of energy that is not abundant and arrives in small quantities, yet remains consistent enough to support life adapted to scarcity. Some deep-sea ecosystems rely on an entirely different source of energy, found near hydrothermal vents and cold seeps where chemical compounds emerge from beneath the sea floor. In these places, energy comes from chemical reactions rather than sunlight, a process known as chemosynthesis, in which certain bacteria use chemicals such as hydrogen sulfide or methane to produce organic matter. Other organisms then depend on these bacteria, either by consuming them directly or by forming close, long-term associations with them. Based on current research, These systems represent only a small fraction of the deep ocean, as most deep-sea life still depends in some way on energy that originated at the surface. What all of these energy pathways share is their pace, as energy moves slowly and availability remains limited, with no sudden increases and no seasonal abundance. Life here is shaped by patience rather than opportunity. In the absence of sunlight, microorganisms play a central role in sustaining deep ocean life, with bacteria and archaea forming the foundation of many food webs by processing the limited energy that reaches these depths. These microorganisms break down organic material as it arrives, converting it into forms that other organisms can use, in a process that is slow but highly efficient, with very little energy wasted. In some regions, bacteria form thin layers on the seafloor or live freely in the water, while in others, they exist in close association with larger organisms, as certain animals host these bacteria within their tissues, allowing chemical energy to be converted directly into nourishment. These relationships are not driven by choice or behavior, but are the result of long-term adaptation to stable conditions, as organisms that could efficiently use limited resources were more likely to persist over time. Because energy input is low, deep-sea ecosystems tend to be simple in structure, with short food chains, low population densities, and infrequent interactions between organisms. Growth occurs slowly, and many deep-sea species take years or even decades to reach maturity, while reproduction is often limited and lifespans may be longer than those of similar species in shallow waters. Movement is carefully measured against energy cost. Unnecessary motion is avoided, and predation, when it occurs, is often brief and efficient. There are no seasonal blooms and no sudden increases in food supply, as conditions remain largely unchanged over long periods of time, allowing life to continue without the need for rapid response or intense competition. From a scientific perspective, these systems show that life does not require abundance to persist, but balance, and processes that operate steadily without interruption. What sustains life in the deep ocean is not intensity, but continuity, as energy arrives slowly, is used carefully, and over time supports organisms uniquely adapted to this environment. This way of living shapes every aspect of deep-sea biology, from metabolism to movement to form. And from here, the focus naturally shifts to how deep-sea creatures have adapted their bodies and behaviors to match these conditions. The conditions of the deep ocean shape life in direct and practical ways, with no excess energy, no rapid change, and no need for speed. And as a result, the bodies of deep-sea creatures reflect efficiency rather than strength or complexity. One of the most noticeable adaptations is body structure, as many deep-sea organisms have soft, flexible bodies, while rigid skeletons are less common at great depths, where pressure is high and movement is minimal. And a softer structure allows internal pressure to match the surrounding environment more easily. Muscle tissue is often reduced, and instead of powerful bursts of movement, deep-sea animals rely on slow, controlled motion that reduces energy use and minimizes unnecessary effort. Metabolism in deep-sea creatures is typically slow, with chemical reactions within the body proceeding at a measured pace, allowing organisms to survive long periods with little food while conserving energy over time. Respiration is adapted to low oxygen availability, with gills and other respiratory surfaces often large relative to body size, allowing efficient gas exchange even when oxygen levels are low. and blood chemistry may also differ in ways that improve oxygen transport under these conditions. Sensory systems are shaped by the absence of light, and vision, where it exists, is often specialized rather than detailed, as some species have large eyes capable of detecting faint light, while others have reduced or absent eyes altogether. In place of vision, other senses become more prominent, with touch and chemical detection playing a greater role in locating food or navigating the environment, operating at close range and matching the limited distances over which interactions occur. Reproduction in the deep ocean is also influenced by scarcity and distance, as encounters between individuals may be rare, and as a result, some species produce fewer offspring while investing more energy in each one, while others rely on strategies that increase the likelihood of fertilization despite low population density. These strategies vary, but they share a common goal of reducing energy loss while maintaining continuity. All of these adaptations are gradual outcomes of long-term stability, not sudden change or innovation, but small adjustments accumulated over long periods of time. The deep ocean does not reward speed or competition, but favors persistence, efficiency, and balance. Another common adaptation in the deep ocean involves the way organisms interact with light, or more accurately, with its absence. As in many species, bioluminescence is present not as a display, but as a practical biological function. Bioluminescence occurs when chemical reactions within an organism produce light, and this light is usually faint and carefully controlled, not meant to illuminate the environment, but to serve specific purposes, such as attracting prey, deterring predators, or allowing individuals to recognize others of the same species at close range. These light-producing systems are highly efficient, requiring relatively little energy compared to the benefit they provide, and the light is often emitted only when needed, rather than continuously. Not all deep-sea organisms produce light, and for many, remaining undetectable is the preferred strategy, with transparency, dark pigmentation, or reflective surfaces helping to reduce visibility in the limited light available. Behavior in the deep ocean is generally minimal, with movements that are slow and deliberate, as sudden activity is rare due to its high energy cost. Feeding behaviors reflect this constraint, and many deep-sea animals wait rather than search, relying on currents to bring food within reach and conserving energy by limiting movement. Predation, when it occurs, is often brief, involving short, efficient actions rather than prolonged pursuit, which reduces energy expenditure and lowers risk. Defense mechanisms are similarly restrained, as instead of active avoidance, many organisms depend on camouflage, body shape, or chemical deterrence, strategies that require little ongoing effort. Adaptations in the deep ocean are not optimized for flexibility or rapid change, but are tuned for consistency, as the environment remains stable and organisms are shaped to match that stability. Over time, these adaptations create a biological rhythm that mirrors the physical rhythm of the deep ocean itself, defined by slow movement, low energy use, and extended periods of stillness. From a scientific perspective, these traits demonstrate how life adjusts to long-term conditions rather than short-term variation, showing that survival does not always depend on speed, strength, or complexity. Instead, in the deep ocean, survival is closely linked to moderation, to using only what is necessary, and to remaining within the limits set by the environment. These adaptations form the foundation for the wide range of deep-sea animals that inhabit the ocean's depths, with each species expressing these principles in slightly different ways. From here, attention naturally turns to specific deep-sea animals and to how these general adaptations appear in individual form. Among the many organisms that inhabit the deep ocean, individual species express the same underlying principles in different forms, each reflecting the conditions of its environment, shaped by limited energy, stable surroundings, and long periods of stillness. One well-studied example is the anglerfish, known for a small light-producing structure that extends from its head, where the light is not bright and does not illuminate the surrounding water, but instead functions at close range by drawing small organisms toward the fish in an environment where food encounters are rare. The anglerfish does not actively pursue prey, remaining largely motionless to conserve energy, and when food comes within reach, the interaction is brief and efficient. Another deep-sea animal that illustrates similar adaptations is the lanternfish, a small species that is, nevertheless, among the most abundant vertebrates in the deep ocean. Lanternfish possess light-producing organs along their bodies that emit faint patterns of light, which are thought to play a role in recognition and camouflage by helping the fish blend with the limited light from above, reducing contrast and making their silhouettes less visible rather than hiding completely. Unlike many deep-sea animals, lanternfish migrate vertically, moving toward the surface at night and returning to deeper waters during the day, a movement that is slow and rhythmic, following daily cycles rather than rapid change. Jellyfish are also common in deep waters, and many deep-sea jellyfish have transparent bodies and delicate structures, with movement that relies on gentle contractions rather than forceful swimming. This method of movement is highly efficient, allowing the animal to remain suspended in the water column with minimal energy use, which is essential in a low-resource environment. The giant squid represents a different expression of deep-sea adaptation, as although it is larger and more muscular than many other deep-sea animals, it still operates within the same constraints. Its movements are infrequent, encounters with other organisms are rare, and its size does not indicate abundance or dominance, but instead reflects a life history adapted to wide spaces and low encounter rates. Across all of these animals, the same pattern appears. As energy is conserved, movement is limited, and interactions are brief. These species do not rely on speed or aggression, but persist by remaining closely aligned with the stable conditions of their environment. Another animal often associated with the deep ocean is the vampire squid, and despite its name, it does not behave like a typical predator, as it lives in regions with very low oxygen, where few other animals can persist. The vampire squid has a slow metabolism and a gelatinous body, and rather than actively hunting, it feeds primarily on small particles drifting through the water, including fragments of organic matter and microorganisms that are collected using fine filaments. This feeding strategy allows the animal to survive in environments where larger prey is scarce, relying on patience rather than pursuit, with movement that is limited and energy use that remains low. Deep-sea crustaceans also illustrate the same principles of adaptation, as many species of shrimp and amphipods live at great depths, often near the seafloor, with bodies that are small and lightweight to reduce the energy required for movement. These animals spend much of their time moving slowly across sediment or remaining still, and when food is encountered, it is consumed efficiently without extended activity, with scavenging being common because organic material arrives infrequently and unpredictably. Some deep-sea animals form loose associations with the sea floor itself. And sea cucumbers, for example, move gradually across the ocean floor while processing sediment as they go, extracting nutrients from organic material embedded in the sediment and leaving little disturbance behind. This method of feeding is steady and continuous, does not depend on sudden availability or competition, and over time supports survival in an environment where change is minimal. Across these varied forms, a shared pattern emerges, as deep-sea animals are not specialized for rapid response or frequent interaction, but are shaped for environments where encounters are rare and resources are limited. Body size, movement, and feeding strategies differ among species, yet the underlying principles remain consistent, with energy conservation taking precedence over speed and consistency mattering more than flexibility. From a scientific perspective, these animals demonstrate how diverse life can be, even under strict physical constraints, showing that complexity does not require abundance and persistence does not require constant activity. Each species represents a stable solution to the same environmental conditions, and over long periods of time, these solutions remain effective as long as the environment itself remains stable. As attention begins to move away from individual animals, the broader rhythm of the deep ocean becomes more noticeable as movement slows further and details soften. From here, the focus shifts toward the overall pace of life in the deep ocean and the quiet rhythm that defines it. As attention moves away from individual animals, the broader rhythm of the deep ocean becomes more apparent. And here, life is shaped less by interaction and more by continuity. Movement in the deep ocean is slow by necessity, as water circulates gradually, guided by differences in temperature and density rather than surface winds. And these currents do not rush, following long paths that often take years to complete a single cycle. For organisms living at depth, this slow movement defines daily experience, as there is no constant flow of new stimuli, and changes arrive gently, if they arrive at all. Particles of organic material continue to settle from above, drifting downward at an unhurried pace, and sometimes moving sideways before descending further. A motion that is subtle and continuous, and forms a quiet background process rather than a noticeable event. Because encounters are infrequent, much of the deep ocean exists in extended stillness, with animals remaining suspended or resting to conserve energy as long periods pass without interaction. Time in this environment feels different, and without light cycles or seasonal shifts, there are few external markers of change, so biological rhythms adjust accordingly, guided more by internal processes than by environmental cues. Many deep-sea organisms experience long intervals between feeding, movement, or reproduction, and these intervals are not interruptions, but the normal pattern of life at depth. Sound follows this rhythm as well, and without surface disturbance, the deep ocean remains quiet for long stretches, with occasional vibrations traveling great distances, but becoming faint and diffuse by the time they arrive. In this setting, activity does not cluster, but spreads out over time, as events that might seem significant in other environments occur slowly and with minimal contrast. The deep ocean does not demand constant response, allowing for long pauses, and for life adapted to this rhythm, stillness is not absence, but balance. As this slow drift continues, the boundaries between motion and rest become less distinct as processes overlap and movement blends into stillness. This steady rhythm forms the backdrop against which deep-sea life persists, moment by moment, without urgency. As the slow movement of water continues, the deep ocean remains largely unchanged, with conditions persisting without interruption. The same temperature, the same pressure, and the same absence of light. Over time, these constants shape not only biological processes, but perception itself. And without frequent change, there is little need for alertness, allowing attention to soften naturally. Life in the deep ocean does not follow a sequence of events, but unfolds as a continuous state in which processes overlap and beginnings and endings are less distinct. Currents continue their quiet paths, particles continue to descend, and organisms remain where they are, moving only when necessary. In this environment, rest and activity are not opposing states, but exist along the same continuum, as periods of movement are brief and return quickly to stillness. Scientific observations suggest that many deep-sea organisms spend most of their time conserving energy, and this is not inactivity, but a stable condition that allows survival over long timescales. The absence of sudden change reduces stress on biological systems, removing the need for rapid adjustment, so processes can proceed slowly and without interruption. As the rhythm remains steady, details become less important, and the environment does not demand attention, allowing awareness to drift. From this perspective, the deep ocean can be understood not as a place of events, but as a space of continuity, where one moment flows into the next without clear boundaries. This rhythm does not aim to engage or stimulate, but provides a constant background against which life continues quietly. As the mind follows this slow pattern, it may begin to rest more deeply, with thoughts moving at their own pace or pausing entirely. From here, the focus turns gently toward reflection. Not reflection that seeks answers, but reflection that notices what is already present. The science remains accurate, the rhythm remains slow, and the background remains calm. When observing the deep ocean as a whole, certain patterns become clear. Not patterns of activity or change, but patterns of stability. As the physical environment remains consistent, pressure does not fluctuate, temperature does not shift, and light does not return. Within these steady conditions, life continues without urgency, with processes unfolding slowly and guided by balance rather than response, as energy is used carefully and nothing moves without reason. From a scientific perspective, this environment highlights a fundamental principle of biology: that life does not require constant stimulation and does not depend on rapid change or frequent interaction, but can persist under conditions that are calm, predictable, and quiet, adapting not by accelerating, but by simplifying. Deep-sea organisms demonstrate this through their physiology, through slow metabolism, minimal movement, and extended lifespans, traits that are not unusual within the context of their environment, but are direct responses to stability. In many ways, the deep ocean removes unnecessary complexity, leaving fewer variables to respond to, fewer signals to interpret, and fewer decisions to make. Scientific observation shows that, over time, systems exposed to fewer disturbances tend to settle into efficient states, where energy pathways become streamlined and processes become reliable. And the deep ocean reflects this principle with clarity. It is a place where continuity matters more than change, and where persistence matters more than speed. From what is currently understood, these conditions have remained largely unchanged for long periods of time, allowing biological systems to remain aligned with their surroundings. Nothing in this environment demands immediate attention, as there are no sudden signals requiring response and no rapid transitions to track. And as a result, the deep ocean operates without urgency, with a rhythm that is steady and a pace that is slow. This scientific understanding does not require interpretation or meaning, as it simply describes how life functions when stability is the dominant condition. For those listening, there is no need to analyze these ideas, and they do not need to be remembered or understood in detail, as they can remain in the background, like the environment they describe. From here, there is nothing new to introduce, only what has already been described continuing quietly. As the science remains consistent, the rhythm remains unchanged, and the environment remains calm. The deep ocean continues as it is, with nothing needing to change, as water moves slowly without direction or urgency. Pressure remains constant, temperature remains steady, and there is no signal to respond to or moment that requires attention. Processes continue quietly in the background as particles drift downward, currents follow their long paths, and life remains present without movement drawing notice, with energy conserved and stillness returning naturally. There is no beginning or ending to observe here, only continuation, as the environment does not ask for awareness or require understanding, and instead allows attention to rest. Thoughts, if they appear, can move slowly as well, without needing to connect or resolve, while sound remains even. Nothing rises suddenly, and nothing pulls focus. As the deep ocean remains unchanged, the mind may begin to do the same, settling into a steady state and letting effort fade, with no need to follow the words as they pass without meaning and dissolve into the background. The rhythm continues, slow, consistent, and quiet, with nothing new introduced and nothing needing to be remembered. As the science remains accurate, the environment remains stable, and the pace remains gentle. From this point, the narration does not move forward, but simply continues without direction, and you may remain here or drift away from the sound entirely, knowing that either way, everything continues as it should.